So this recent round all started with this video from the Young Turks talking about Aaron Mate in their postgame.
They said Aaron Mate yelled at me. And so
Aaron Mate lied. Aaron Mate. everyone cares what Aaron Mate has to say, right? Okay. The guy who denies that Syrian children were killed with chemical attacks. Yeah.
And
fuck
gets
Aaron
paid
Mate.
by the...
Yeah, fuck you.
Anyway,
let's move on. Let's end the freaking pod. I can't.
Okay, see, that's what happens.
I can't stand that guy. And I can't stand the very intentional disinformation they put out there in regard to disgusting dictators around the world. The very people they seem to be working for, to be quite honest with you. Let's move on.
All right, we're done.
Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting.
So let's state the obvious. That was gross. That was a smear. It's so absurd that the first time I watched it, I literally laughed out loud.
First of all, it is unbelievably funny to see Kyle Kulinski play a video with Stephen Michael Davis's logo on it. Again, subscribe to his channel. Absolutely amazing. A little while back, I was reading a book that was recommended to me by one of my patrons called The Modern Mercenary. Now, this book seeks to be a clear and concise documentation of what's actually going on in the world when it comes to military contractors. This means that you get the good, the bad, and the ugly. And one of the most interesting concepts in this book that was brought up was this idea of neo-medievalism, which fundamentally asks the question, who are you? How do you identify, especially when you're in a mercenary scenario? Are you somebody who defines yourself as being an American? Are you somebody who defines yourself by a racial or ethnic group? Or are you someone who defines yourself by your state? Or maybe you define yourself by your religion. The reason that this is brought up in these circumstances is because the idea of competing allegiances has been with us throughout all of human history, and it's most prominently featured in our history in the medieval period, and mercenary or mercenarism has actually brought that back on the battlefield, and there are negative and positive implications of this phenomenon. Now, the reason the Kyle Kulinski portion of this Cenk versus Jimmy Dore, Anna versus Jimmy Dore saga reminds me of that book is because what we're witnessing when we're watching Kyle Kulinski try to snake his way through this drama is Kyle Kulinski having competing allegiances.
The reasons why I want nothing to do with this, number one, it's obvious. Jimmy, Cenk, and Anna are all personal friends of mine. So it puts me in a really weird place. Now, you can pretend like that's not a good reason, but you all know it's a good reason, and you all know if you were in my shoes, you'd feel the exact same way.
On the one hand, Kyle is friendly with Cenk Uygur and Anna Kasparian. He was once an affiliate, even though I don't believe he ever worked for the TYT network. They definitely helped him grow. Cenk and Kyle founded Justice Democrats together, and when Cenk was kicked out for being a total creep in his past, Kyle actually resigned in protest with Cenk Uygur. So these guys were thick as thieves. They were best friends in the whole world, according to the internet, which means not really that good of friends because people technically aren't really great friends on the internet. I hate to break that down for you guys. But also, Kyle Kulinski defines himself not only as a friend to Cenk and as a fan of the Young Turks, but as a progressive and as an alternative media progressive who hates big money and he hates what he sees to be the political establishment. He's also an anti-American lefty. He's in the Blame America crowd. This would align him more with somebody like Jimmy Dore, who he also considers a friend. So the great divide that has come between the Young Turks and Jimmy Dore has impacts on Kyle, much like it has impacts on other figures in progressive media. And what we saw in his pitiful response to the Young Turks and to Jimmy Dore was Kyle Kulinski essentially trying to play the middleman in order to serve two different allegiances, which is quite fascinating. And honestly, as much as I don't like Kyle, as much as I laugh when Kyle says he wants to talk about policy because the man literally knows nothing beyond headlines about policy, I do feel bad for him because there are people I have met doing this job that I like. I plug Devin Tracy on this channel all the time, who's over on Censored and on Patreon. If you want to support him on Censored, then use promo code AIU. If you want to go on Patreon and you don't want a censored subscription, you could do there. You get all his content. It's amazing. It's only $5. Absolutely stunning, because this is somebody that I get along with. I plug Stephen Michael Davis because I like his content, and he's also somebody that I get along with. I plug people like Kirk Wilcox, same exact reason. Somebody like Lauren Chen, was a big fan of her before I started doing YouTube, and behind the scenes, she's been one of the most helpful and friendly people to me on the entire platform. As much as I like to give credit to you guys for spurging out and getting me on Tim Pool's podcast, I was told by the producer that if you keep replying her with a specific name, she literally mutes those names, and the reason that I got on is because Lauren Chen convinced her that I would be great on the show. Now, if any of these people were to get into a fight, that could theoretically produce a situation for me, like Kyle, where I feel really torn. But honestly, it kind of wouldn't, because we disagree all the time. Every single person that I named, even though I like them, even though I like their content, I have my disagreements with, and it hasn't impacted our relationships. So while I do feel bad for Kyle Kulinski that he tried to thread this needle and now everybody hates him, you have to also understand that this is a consequence of the progressive ideology that all of these people have. Because in progressive ideology, political disagreements aren't disagreements on policy or disagreements of ideas that can be worked out. These are fundamental moral disagreements because these people have inserted politics in place of their religion, which is quite ironic because Kyle Kulinski's show is called Secular Talk. This is why, even though Kyle Kulinski put out a video where he was in support of Jimmy Dore 90% of the way, Jimmy Dore ended up not liking him, and he ended up responding to him. And rightfully so, to a certain extent.
With a skirt so short. It wasn't a pencil skirt. It was like a fluffy one, too, but so short that she bent over in front of me, and I literally saw her ass and her thong. She's wearing a thong. I literally saw it. And everybody saw it. And I go, "Hey, Anna, nice new skirt." And everybody laughed. Like, they laughed louder than I thought they would. And so it humiliated her. She got humiliated in the middle of the newsroom. And I did it. And I felt bad. At that time, we were friendly. And I was just busting her balls, right, for dressing like that in a newsroom. You're going to bend over and show me your ass? I think that's a little... I'm not offended, but I think that's a little risque. Imagine if I did that. If I walked around showing my ass to everybody. So when I did that, so she got really mad. She got humiliated. Her face turned red. She tried to insult me back, and it just fell flat, and she looked, bad. And I felt bad for her. I didn't fight. I didn't want to make her feel that, but I just wanted to make a little joke. And all I said was, "Hey, Anna, nice new skirt." And everybody in the newsroom, because everybody saw how inappropriate she dresses. She used to dress. And everybody saw it. And so that's why it got such a huge laugh, and she was so humiliated. So I felt bad for her. So the next day I wrote her a card saying, "Hey, I'm sorry. I won't do that again. That was inappropriate. You don't have to worry about that happening again. I won't comment on your clothes anymore." I should have said, no matter how fucking ridiculous.
You mean you'll stop commenting on her thong?
On her thong, that I could see.
If I'm being objective about this, even though Jimmy's my friend, if somebody spoke about my mom or my sister or my girlfriend like that, it would take every fiber of my being to not want to beat the shit out of them. Because that's humiliating. And he admits that it was a humiliating thing in the segment, but then it doesn't occur to you that maybe bringing this up again and talking about it in the way you're talking about it is like gonna humiliate her yet again?
Kyle Kulinski's video had that lovely moment in it where he was like, if anybody like Jimmy Dore would have said something like that to a girl that I was dating or my mother or my sister, he went full politician accused of sexual harassment himself by saying, I have a mother, a daughter, a sister, women everywhere in my lives, and I would defend them. He would beat the crap out of them. Jimmy Dore made a joke, you might say it's an inappropriate joke, about Anna Kasparian dressing inappropriately for a newsroom and an event that happened, and based on the stories and the contradictions within the stories that we've covered in previous videos, it seems like Jimmy Dore, who was telling the story before Anna tried to blackmail him, is telling the truth about what actually was said, which doesn't seem to be all that bad to me. Now, should Jimmy Dore have said it? According to Jimmy Dore, no, because he apologized to Anna Kasparian for saying that, and wrote her a card, got her a gift, and she said it was no big deal, let bygones be bygones. But the thing that Kyle Kulinski left out of his video, his dramatic video, where he talked about how Jimmy was right 90% of the way, was the fact...
I just look at that and I think, that's kind of gross. And so my initial reaction was, and I still feel it to this day, is, whoa, okay, I want nothing to do with any of this.
That this was brought up in a blackmail scenario. And when you do a long video and you take Jimmy Dore's side for a lot of it and you're trying to thread that needle, you can't leave out the most crucial portion of it.
Nice news skirt which word is sexual? Nice, news, or skirt? And I did it because that was thrust upon me. And then afterwards, I apologized immediately. And I told her I'd never, ever, don't you have to worry about that again. And that was because we were friends, and that's under the water, and now she's weaponizing it. And that's how he should have covered it, and he didn't. He didn't even condemn her for doing that, for none of it. So Kyle leaves the blackmail part out, and he just acts like I started talking about Anna's clothes for no reason on my show. Yeah. Watch this. This is stunning.
Now, again, as I've said multiple different times, I don't like any of the parties involved in this dispute. But if you're going by the logic that these people have laid out, I've said it over and over again, Jimmy Dore is correct. One of the most asinine points that Kyle makes throughout the course of this entire video is that he keeps talking about how this is personal, and then he brings in the fact that Cenk is not corrupt based on the money that he received.
It goes deeper than that too, though, because he took money from Katzenberg. Did that make him change his opinions? No. I got news for you guys. If you've watched TYT for a long time, you'll know this. He's always had a lot of cringe opinions. And this is a guy who walked away from $1 million MSNBC contract because he felt like they were going to muzzle him. So then would he turn around and take investment money for his company for them to muzzle him or force him to change his opinions? No, he wouldn't do it.
Again, Kyle Kulinski, Cenk Uygur, and Jimmy Dore go non-stop about how $5,000 donations to politicians are in fact corrupting. If you take these donations, that is not people donating with politicians that are already in line with them. That is people bribing politicians in order to change their positions. And then that leads to the corruption, blah, blah, blah. Cenk took $20 million from Jeffrey Katzenberg, and now Kyle Kulinski's doing some special pleading about how Cenk really isn't corrupted by the money, that he would never give up editorial control, and we should just trust Cenk, even though there's public disclosures and all this other information that goes with campaign finance law, none of which is true for the Young Turks, which is a private corporation and does not have to disclose that information to their shareholders. So Kyle is doing special pleading on behalf of Cenk. He's basically making an exemption that he mocks if a politician says they are not corrupted by much smaller donations. And again, those are donations. This was an investment into Cenk's company. It is not unreasonable to think that Jeffrey Katzenberg's group got a percentage of that company. I mean, really, think about it. Would you invest $20 million of your own money into a company without owning part of that, without having some control over how that money's spent? Cenk cut a deal with somebody who's a bundler who, if they gave $5,000 to Hillary Clinton, Kyle Kulinski would call that corruption, but all of a sudden, because Cenk is Kyle's best buddy, that's not corruption. And the only issue Kyle has is that Cenk did crowdfunding and he's acting like a televangelist. Again, weak sauce from Kyle all the way around, and you could tell that that weakness coming off of Kyle is not something just present in his videos. This is something that Kyle presents in his personal and private life. Because look how he handled a situation where he invited Jimmy Dore onto his podcast with Crystal Ball because of the drama and him not wanting to get involved in this. And even though Kyle Kulinski says this is personal and has nothing to do with politics, but had these circumstances been aligned with politicians, he would say this is not personal and has everything to do with politics.
So the way they treated me after this was not like you would treat a friend or even an enemy. The way they treated me was unbelievably rude and unprofessional to the extreme. So you see that I have a date booked. So she gives me the date. I picked June 24th. So when June 24th comes around, I'm ready to go do the show. And I realize they haven't given me a link. They haven't nothing. There's no text reminding me, no nothing. So we're supposed to go at 10 a.m. And at 5 to 10, I texted them both saying, hey, I have this on my calendar today. Are we still doing it? And they ghosted me. So they decided not to have me on the show, and they didn't tell me. They didn't send me an email the day ahead of time or even the day or whatever, nothing. And they didn't respond to my text when I sent it to them. They just ghosted me.
So Kyle Kulinski, in an effort to stay out of it, which again, I'm not condemning him for trying to stay out of it if he has conflicting loyalties between the two people that are fighting, says that he didn't want to have anybody on the podcast because he didn't want to ask them any questions, etc., etc. But what Kyle doesn't really tell you in full is that he actually booked Jimmy Dore on a podcast, and rather than tell Jimmy Dore beforehand that he wasn't going to have him on the show, he essentially ghosted him for the appearance. And Jimmy Dore gives his version of events where he shows the text messages, just so you can see how cowardly Kyle Kulinski acted in this situation.
Then about 2.5 hours later, in the afternoon, so I was supposed to do it at 10 a.m., around 12:30, they sent me a text. And here's the text, okay? And the reason why I bring this up is because Kyle brought it up. So now that's why I'm bringing this up. So I'm going to tell you. So here's my text. Are we doing a show today? My calendar says we are. And Kyle says, hey, Jimmy. So again, that was at 2.5 hours later, after they ghosted me, he says, hey, Jimmy, we are trying to stay as far away from the war between you and Aaron and TYT as possible. On the policy, we agree much more with you, Russia, Syria, forced to vote, etc. We're disturbed by Anna's attacks on Aaron, but we also didn't like the way you talked about Anna's dress. Huh? What?
Now, I understand that some people are afraid of confrontation. I understand that people don't want to get into it with other people. But that's cowardice on full display. You had Jimmy Dore booked as a guest for a certain date. You knew that you weren't going to have him on the show, and rather than tell him that you had booked another guest in his slot and the reason why, you decided to just ghost him and tell him after the fact. That's really messed up, Kyle, and doesn't matter how much you want to avoid confrontation, when you don't treat somebody with the basic respect and human decency that they would deserve as your friend, that's messed up. And honestly, it's shameful that he acted that way in this situation. And I understand why Jimmy Dore is angry that he was treated this way. It would be one thing to inform him about a scheduling change a couple of days in advance, a week in advance, that they booked another guest for a specific topic, whatever. But to do this to him, to somebody that you're going to call your friend, I'm 100% in agreement with Jimmy Dore, who I do not like, and I've stated the reasons why I don't like him multiple different times on this channel, in this scenario, that this was cowardly. And even worse, of all the people to fill this slot...
Now, Kyle went on to do a segment with Cenk Uygur's nephew instead of me.
Kyle brought on Cenk's nephew. And by the way, there's a hilarious moment in here where they're all responding to each other and they're calling Cenk's nephew, and I find it hilarious, so I'm just going to play you that mashup.
With Cenk Uygur's nephew, Cenk's nephew. To have on Cenk's nephew.
Bringing on Cenk's nephew is the lowest move you could possibly do in this scenario. First and foremost, it's Cenk's nephew, so on its own, that is a terrible option. I mean, really, you can't do better than the nephew of the other guy. Terrible. But also, he's Cenk Uygur's nephew, so you're bringing on a relative, and then the topic comes up, and rather than say, hey, look, we're not talking about this, so we don't want to hear this from happening, you let Cenk's nephew tell a bad joke about it, minimizing what's going on rather than staying out of it. Now, do I think Jimmy Dore is overblowing this? Sure. But from his perspective, he got ghosted, and when he saw the show, it was a relative of the guy who was smearing him, somebody else who probably isn't on his side in this issue, making fun of the whole situation that Jimmy takes really seriously.
When I got into my, scandal about my old tweets when Mike Cernovich dug them up and wrote an article calling me a sexist and a racist and all the negative things in the book, nobody defended me. And listen, I'm totally fine with that. I never held a grudge over it. I never thought, like, how dare, all my friends in lefty circles not come out of the woodworks and, put their neck on the line for me. I just thought, listen, this is par for the course. And it was the exact same thing with Crystal when it came to that article that Nathan J. Robinson wrote not that long ago, where he basically argued that she's emboldening Nazism because she does a show with Sagar, who's populist right, and populist right is like what the Nazis were, so therefore you're being like too soft on the right and too soft on Tucker Carlson, and you're basically like emboldening Nazis and stuff. It was a silly article. I don't think Nathan's arguments were very good, and nobody defended her. So, you know, I don't think she cares. She was upset by the article, but she's not mad at other lefties for not like immediately coming out there and responding, because it is what it is. I watch this stuff unfold like everybody else watches it unfold, and sometimes I just look at it and I'm like, well, that's dumb, and I move along, and I don't, you know, do a whole monologue or whatever over it. So anyway, listen, I'm not trying to make an excuse. What happened to Aaron was wrong.
Now, another thing that really jumped out to me, and if you're a progressive, you should take note of this, is this idea that Kyle Kulinski is not obligated to defend anybody, even if he thinks they're being wrongfully attacked and smeared, and McCarthy smeared, as Kyle said a bunch of different times on this video, and both videos actually, is that Kyle's like, well, progressives are cowards, and they don't typically defend other progressives, even when they think the attacks are unfair, presumably because they don't want to get caught up in the storm defending somebody, hence, you know, the cowardice, which I found really interesting, because if you attack people that I know on the internet and you do it in an unfair way, I will make a note of that in response videos to you. I've done it before, and I will do it again on this channel, because I'm not going to let my friends hang out to dry, or at least my internet friends hang out to dry based on nothing. And if it was my personal friends, like people that I hang out with on the regular in my personal life, or I talk to behind the scenes in my personal life, I would definitely not let them be attacked mercilessly and unfairly on the internet without speaking up for them. But Kyle apparently does not feel that same way, because like many progressives who purport to believe that they can solve all of your problems through the power of government, actually believe in their real lives that if it's not them, then it doesn't really matter. They're me people, not you people. Now, after Jimmy Dore went out of his way to shame Kyle for his tepid response to this whole situation and make fun of the fact that Kyle left out the most important detail related to Anna Kasparian's accusations against Jimmy Dore, Kyle produced another video where he weakly gave in even more to Jimmy Dore, and this, or the other video, or a combination of the two videos, essentially pleased nobody, and now Kyle is on the outs with the Young Turks and with Jimmy Dore.
Matthew H. asked, been watching you since 2014, just wondering when you'll have people like Kyle or Vosh on the Friday Power Panel. So I honestly, I don't know enough about Vosh, but I'll look into him more. I know that he got involved in some of these controversies, but and we have people on from the network and our guest hosts more often. Kyle is no longer part of the network, and so he says that he disagrees with us on some policy issues. It is what it is. Good luck to him, and let's see if he can placate the people he's trying to placate. My guess is it'll end in disaster. It has already started in disaster, and probably will head in that direction. So we've had Kyle on many times before, and we had a great relationship with him. We've done many shows with him and supported him. Nowadays, though, he seems to be going in a different direction. Everybody's free to make their own choices.
If one day I was standing at a bus stop and a woman was standing in the street and the bus was coming and it was going to hit her, and so I had to move quick and I pushed her out of the way and I pushed her on the side. I pushed her down on the sidewalk. The way Kyle Kulinski would tell that story is, did you hear Jimmy Dore push an old lady down on the sidewalk? Well, he leaves out the part that the bus was coming and it was going to kill her.
I just want to remind you that these people constantly talk about how they're like FDR, how they just want to forward FDR's agenda. And Kyle Kulinski, out of all these people, is the most prone to invoke FDR and talk about how this is the winning formula and they're just like an FDR-like movement and they're going to take over the Democratic Party. Remember, FDR's coalition was the most diverse coalition in the history of America. They brought together people from all over the country despite major differences. One of those huge differences is that FDR's coalition had black people and Southern Dixiecrats in it, among many, many other competing constituencies. And what are they fighting over? What does this all trace back to? What has all this personal venom been dumped onto the progressive sphere on the internet over? A procedural maneuver that Jimmy Dore wanted Democrats in the House to take in order to get a floor vote on Medicare for All, because Jimmy wanted people on record on whether or not they were for or against it for future primary challenges. By the way, Jimmy's plan wouldn't have worked, because if people know that Medicare for All isn't going to pass in the House of Representatives, then even if they're against it and they think it will help them politically, they could still vote for it, and thus you don't gain any useful information on if, when push comes to shove, if there's a chance of it actually passing, whether or not that representative will actually vote for it. So a meaningless procedural maneuver has caused a month-long vicious, nasty divide with Me Too allegations, and it's ruined friendships among the progressives, but they're like FDR, who threaded the needle between the Dixiecrats and black people. Okay, got it.
So yeah, and giving in to no men, trying to appease them when that's a hopeless task. I don't know who that might be. I'm sure it's not a guy whose name rhymes with Mile Malinsky.
Ooh, okay.
So overall, I think a really important lesson in this video that you can take from the progressive fight is something related back to the book I was talking about in the beginning of the video. And that's the idea of neo-medievalism, competing loyalties, and the challenges that they lay out. You need to get your house in order and figure out what your top priority is before you start getting in the middle of other people's fights. Because if you're more aligned with the progressive radical ideology and you're a guy like Kyle Kulinski, then obviously you side with Jimmy Dore. If you're more aligned with personal friendships and people who have helped you out over the course of years, then your allegiance lies with Cenk Uygur. If you try to serve both people, then you end up in a situation where you please nobody and you're on the outs with both people. Now, Kyle's gonna be fine. Even if he loses a lot of people over this, his show's still doing pretty well, and just from the look of it, you can tell that his operation requires far fewer people than the Young Turks operation does, so he can afford to lose more. On top of that, he has the podcast with Crystal Ball, which I think is relatively successful. I haven't checked the numbers, but you can assume Crystal Ball and Sargar, when they went over to Breaking Points, did pretty well. So chances are a combination between Kyle Kulinski and Crystal Ball can draw in a significant portion of progressives to make that podcast viable. So while financially it looks like the only party that's being damaged in this scenario is the Young Turks, in terms of character,
You said that it was a white guy. What happened?
all of these people have taken a hit, and honestly, it might be Kyle Kulinski the most, because not a lot of people knew that he was this shady of a character. Everybody knew Anna Kasparian was better than you.
Am I saying that I'm better than you? I guess I'm going a little further than you are. Yeah, I'm fucking better than you.
Much better than you.
Okay? Much better than you.
You are garbage.
You are garbage.
You're garbage.
You're garbage.
But a lot of people thought, since Kyle talks in a boring NPR voice, that he wasn't this much of a weasel, and I think to a certain extent, at least for the diehards, that will be stuck to him for a very long time. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you liked the video, you can show me by leaving a like. You can subscribe for more content. You can follow me on all my social medias. They're linked in the description. You can support me via the support links. You can get yourself a t-shirt, Slippery Sean. I have others, designs, Teespring store. Till next time.